Throughout history, some societies have used training not just to prepare people for conflict, but to shape who they are. They use movement and hardship to construct an identity, to teach people how to think, how to walk, how to stay silent, and how to be a part of a bigger whole. Sparta's agoge system is one of the most well-known examples. However, it was not the only one. From Roman legions to samurai schools, from the Janissary barracks of Ottoman Empire to Zulu regiments, we see different versions of the same idea, that movement, when structured and repeated under pressure, can become something more than a skill. It becomes a way of being. In the Roman Empire, the training of a soldier was his civic responsibility. The Roman legionnaire was expected to march long distances with full gear, dig trenches, build fortifications, and trained with weapons that were heavier than those used in actual combat. The training was about building a person who could persist under any conditions. It did not consider individual achievements or health. The bodies of these men were a shield for the great empire. Movement in the Roman army was not open to interpretation. All the drills were incredibly precise. Every step and every reaction to command was standardized. Soldiers trained with a gladius made of wood that was deliberately heavier than a real one. They practiced on posts called pali, striking thousands of times to build endurance and control. Camp building was repeated daily as a system of discipline. Fighting in close formation required perfect timing and breath control because every soldier had to move as one. The Roman army was actually not that big if we consider the size of the empire. At different times, it ranged from 300 to 450,000 soldiers maximum. But the efficiency gained from this form of training made them unstoppable. Their domination came from endless repetition of physical habits and commitment to cohesion. Their loyalty to the state was drilled into them with every moment and every movement that they made. In medieval Japan, boys born into samurai families began martial training very early. Around age 5, they began to train with wooden swords to develop coordination and sensitivity to power and distance. They also practiced archery, horseback riding, and various forms of grappling like yawara or sumain. These techniques were embedded into a moral framework from the very beginning. It was called bushido, and it emphasized virtues like loyalty, courage, respect, benevolence, honesty, and honor. All the physical training was serving the purpose of developing a perfect warrior, with impeccable ethics and discipline. Every gesture was structured. Even the act of drawing out the sword has a specific form. The act of moving was tied to moral values of Bushido. By the Edo period, kata, a structured movement form, became the central tool for refining skill. Katas were precise, ritualized sequences repeated to internalize the sense of timing, build perfect posture, and develop breath control. Swordsmanship schools such as Kashima Shinto-ryu and Ito-ryu developed strict pedagogies. The students practiced until the movements were automatic and there was no place to ask why. The mastery of the form served erasing the ego. Training of young samurai also involved cultivating presence and calmness under pressure. Concepts like mushin, no mind, and zanshin, remaining mind, encourage practitioners to maintain awareness without fixation and to ask with decisiveness while remaining emotionally undisturbed. These were not abstract ideals, they were trained daily through endless repetition. In this sense, movement became a meditation, a mental drill as much as a physical one. The Ottomans approached creation of the infantry units with practices questionable by today's moral standards. The Janissaries were the first modern standing army and probably the first infantry force equipped with firearms. The units were formed from young boys taken through what is called the devshirme system. The Ottomans took Christian children from Balkan villages, selected for their potential, forcefully converted them to Islam, renamed them, and raised them within military schools called Asemi Oglan. Training was a daily chore, repetitive and brutal. Janissaries drilled in unison with swords and matchlocks. They learned formations that prioritized discipline over aggression. They trained to suppress the reaction, to maintain composure under stress, and to follow commands without any hesitation. They practiced calligraphy, recited the Quran, and lived communally. As soon as the boy was taken from his family and brought to the military academy, the Janissary unit became his only family. Each day was structured to build mental and physical compliance. The diet was used as a part of control. The sharing of the sultan's soup was a ritualistic act aimed at showing their loyalty to the empire. Refusing to eat it was a sign of dissent and had real-world consequences for the soldier. Recruits were tested constantly for loyalty to the state and for efficiency of their movement. Promotion was tied not only to skill, but to the ability to embody the values of the corps. Janissaries were not allowed to marry or engage in commerce. Their identity was wholly shaped by the empire, and their loyalty was formed through complete restructuring of mind and body. This form of training created servants of the state with no past and the future defined by obedience. In Africa, in the early 19th century, the Zulu kingdom, under the leadership of King Shaka, organized young men into age-based military regiments called Amabutho. Boys joined regiments at puberty, lived in separate military kraals where they began years of physical preparation. Young men were grouped into regiments called Ibutho. The soldiers underwent rigorous training for combat, but they also were used to perform other civil duties and some rituals. To develop toughness, they ran barefoot over rocky terrains for hours to condition feet and lungs. They drilled relentlessly combat rhythm exercises, shield work formation, and call and response commands. Big part of their training was music. Songs and rhythms were used to regulate movement and pace. Shaka's reform to shorten the traditional throwing spear, assegai, into the close combat ikiwa meant that warriors had to train in aggressive, coordinated charges. Discipline was strict. Those who broke formation or hesitated in battle were punished or expelled. Sex and marriage were prohibited until the regiment was released from duty. The training forged their identity as an obedient and loyal citizen. The readiness to serve was demonstrated through synchronized movement. The infamous Spartan agoge was a state-run program that shaped nearly every aspect of Spartan boy's life. From the age of 7, he was removed from his family and placed under the authority of the state. From that moment, the identity of a man would no longer be tied to lineage or household, but to Sparta itself. This system was aiming to form a shared civic character and absolute loyalty to the state. All individuality was squeezed out of the Spartan man by the brutal physical and psychological training. The most secretive layer of the Spartan agoge was the crypteia. Around age 18, select Spartan youths was sent into the countryside to survive alone. They carried only a dagger and a cloak and were tasked with observing, intimidating, and at times killing the helots, which were the enslaved underclass in Sparta. They were expected to survive without any resources, not being seen, and to deliver fatal blows to strangers without any hesitation. It was a test of independence and mental detachment, a moment of truth to whether the training they went through have created a perfect killing machine they were supposed to be. Historical accounts from Plutarch and others suggest that the crypteia was not a rite of passage open to all. It was a way to select the most capable for leadership. You became an extension of state policy through movement and embodiment of the will of Sparta. In the modern world, this logic continues. Military academies, state sports schools, and ideological youth programs have borrowed the same tools that men have been grinded by through the entire course of history. The Hitler Youth in the 19th century Germany trained boys from an early age through physical training and group rituals. Soviet sports schools applied scientific structure to daily routines. By putting young people through brutal training and ideological indoctrination, the system made them an extension of itself. suppressing individual and his will for the collective benefit. They served as a living proof of ideology. Their bodies were used as a tool for political agenda. Across all the systems, we see repeating patterns like early separation from family and immersion into a collective identity and physical hardship that redefines the relationship with comfort, fear, and pain. Movement was not a vessel for creativity, but a tool of indoctrination. They suppressed speech and thought and cultivated silence and obedience. They transformed the body into a disciplined, readable form. Spartan boys stood still while being whipped. Janissaries drilled until there was no trace of where they came from. Samurai practiced until their movements were indistinguishable from those of their ancestors. Zulu regiments moved as one, no step out of place. All the systems are about one thing: removing the identity and shaping the human being through movement. There was no need to tell them what to believe. It was drilled into how they acted in their own body. The repetition of the same gestures, under pressure, over time, does something. It doesn't just train you to be physically efficient, it completely transforms who you are. These methods show us the power of movement and how it can reshape a person. When used as a tool to elevate, it can bring you to incredible heights. But if used to suppress your will, it will also succeed. Sparta didn't teach values through stories and philosophical thought. It taught through sweat and pain and quiet, though completely obliterating your senses of self and crafting you into an undistinguishable cog in the machine. Other cultures found different methods, but the goal was the same: make the body carry the message of the power of the system it represents.